This is Hannibal from the HannibalTV.com, and I'm going to do my weekly review of what I find interesting in Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter. And I'll be honest with you, there's a few noteworthy things this week, but it's not really a big news week in the professional wrestling world. It's more interesting, actually, in the UFO world, as I've been reporting on that news a lot in the last couple of days. So you can look that up on this channel. I'll start with WWE news. Stephanie McMahon said WWE over-indexes with their African-American audience. She says 21% of their audience is African-American, so we utilize their platforms to really amplify the message of inclusion. She went on to say about 40% of the champions in WWE are African American, and she believes that that representation is critical. In other words, there probably will never be a situation where there isn't a black champion in at least one of the brands in WWE for that reason. Ric Flair's wife, Wendy Barlow, I think that's his fifth wife. She apparently is close to 100% after defeating COVID-19. The same disease, or not disease, I don't know what it is, I guess a virus. The same virus that Renee Young has apparently recovered from now. At one point or another, about 40 WWE talents have had it. They've all recovered. WWE officially announced SummerSlam will not be in Boston, nor will any of its related events be in Boston, and people can get full refunds on their tickets. Lance Storm has been fully released by WWE after being furloughed earlier this year. But from my understanding, Sylvain Grenier, Pat Patterson's buddy that, according to reports, he first met when Sylvain was a dancer at a Montreal strip club. Somehow Sylvain Grenier, despite being involved in the WWE concussions lawsuit, is still an agent for WWE. PCO, Quebecer Pierre, former Ring of Honor world champion, three-time WWE Tag Team champion, put out a tweet saying he was insulted at WWE's parody of the Quebecers they did this week on NXT. And I already did a video on this, and I just think it's pathetic that WWE refused to hire any of the Rougeau sons, and at least two of them are really good, had a lot of potential, and could actually have really built a lot of interest in WWE in Quebec, but they basically said the hell with that. They gave one of them a tryout, despite him having all the potential in the world, 6'6", over 300 pounds. I've gone out with the guy Cedric. He is one of the most impressive ladies' man ever. The girls absolutely love him. But WWE had no interest in him. They'd rather mock the Jacques Rougeau and Pierre-Carl Ouellet, a team that was actually over, by doing like an insult, unfunny comedy bit full of leg slapping. Everyone on NXT loves the leg slapping. So yeah, PCO is insulted by that. I don't blame him. I thought about asking Jacques about it, but I know Jacques would be. I still might, but I don't know if I want to upset him because Jacques is such a good-natured guy, but I'm sure he would also not be too happy about seeing that. Kayla Braxton, who has also recovered from COVID-19, apparently went off social media. Wrestlers go on and off social media all the time, but for some reason, people now report on it now. God, let me cry over this. She's gone off social media. Remember, it wasn't too long ago that the Young Bucks got off Twitter. I don't know if they're still off or not because I never followed them at my Devon Hannibal or the Hannibal TV Twitter accounts. But how is that news? They got off Twitter. I don't understand it, how that's news these days. Who the hell cares? I am going to be doing an interview this weekend with Lee Cole, who was a ring boy in WWE. His brother, Tom Cole, received a $55,000 settlement from WWE related to the ring boy scandal. And Lee was apparently also quietly paid off related to all that bizarre stuff going on in the early 90s. He's going to be talking to me about the details of all that. They certainly don't have like 13 to 16-year-old ring boys working for WWE anymore. The main people involved in that scandal were, who was it? Mel Phillips, Terry Garvin, and Pat Patterson. Phillips and Garvin were really never heard from again, and Patterson resigned briefly. Never came back to his talent relations position, but got back with the company and is still with the company to this day. AEW handily defeated NXT this week, 0.32 to 0.17. This is the first time AEW has been in the 0.3s for a long time. Raw did a 0.46, second lowest viewership in history. SmackDown did a 0.45. DK Loud tipped me $10 and says he wants to see me in UFC or Bellator. Well, I'll get to the UFC news, but UFC pays always $11,500 a fight, which is really low, actually, really low, considering how much you have to train to fight. So I would really have to be made a good offer at 37 years old to want to go into MMA these days, because if I was in my 20s still, that'd be another thing. But I'm actually doing quite well at reporting and interviews. So at my age, I'd like to do what makes me money, which right now is this. AEW and more AEW news. Apparently there was a spot, I didn't see it, but they had like a match that involved thumbtacks where, according to reports, both wrestlers were slammed into the same thumbtacks, and that's no different than sharing needles. You get slammed into the thumbtacks, and maybe some of them fall out. Your opponent gets slammed into them. The same thumbtacks go into your opponent, unless some of them are still stuck in your back. It's like sharing needles, having sex without a condom, but a little bit more dangerous. Sammy Guevara returned to AEW for anyone that cares. And Tony Khan made a statement about this, saying, during his suspension, Sammy was very contrite. I asked him to use the time to try and become a better person, and I think he did. Sammy was off television for a month and suspended without pay for 30 days, and I think it was the right time for Sammy to come back because he's shown that he's very sorry and he can change. He spent every day over the past month trying to prove that. Again, if there was a union, he never would have been suspended. The comment was inappropriate, saying he wanted to rape Sasha Banks. Everyone knows he was just basically using slang to describe he wanted to have sex with her. I don't use that terminology when I'm talking about people that I find attractive. But he did say this in 2016, long before AEW was ever formed. So whatever. If you love going out and saying how much of a better person your heels are, great. I'm sorry. Maybe the Jim Cornettes of the world can torture themselves, and even though they find the product horrible, they need the money so badly from their critiques of AEW that they'll sit through it week to week and torture themselves watching that stuff. I won't do that. I have better things to do with my time. I actually saw a video of Vince Russo taking some weed hits before watching Raw to see if it would help to get high before watching Raw. I can tell you I have tried to watch the current product after taking THC drops a few times because I don't like any kind of smoke. It's bad for your lungs. THC drops is the healthiest way to get high. And I still couldn't sit through 2 minutes, let alone 5 minutes. So good for these people that want to torture themselves. I couldn't imagine doing that. Also, Eddie Kingston debuted on Dynamite. Eddie Kingston, I met him at a recent PCW Ultra event. Really nice guy, and he is a viewer of this channel. So if you get a contract with AEW, congratulations to Eddie Kingston. I'm not sure if he's actually signed or not, but for the money's sake, I hope he gets it. In MLW news, the company has announced that they have signed Jacob Fatu to an additional 4-year deal, and they're hoping to start back up in December. There have been some fans tweeting to Court Bauer, the CEO of MLW, and MLW, that they should sign me as an announcer or whatever in some capacity. So I would like to see that. I think it could be a mutual beneficial situation. If I could be in one company, that would be the company. DK Loud tipped me $10. Says he understands my view on the low pay for UFC fighters, but maybe a super fight one day would be appealing. I think you destroy them, meaning leg kicks. Well, I'd be up for you know what? You do have a point. If I continue to get more popular in a few years, a company, let's say like Bellator, wants to put me in a super fight against, let's see, Ken Shamrock at one point challenged me, but really he's over the hill now. I don't think that would be a good match. But if the right fight came along for the right money, where I could actually do nothing but train for the fight, for a proper training camp, so I'd be ready to fight, yes, I would do it. But not for $11,500. No way. Dr. Loud, I appreciate your tips. Ring of Honor has not announced anything about a restart, nor have they announced anything regarding their booker, Marty Scurll, having sex with a 16-year-old when he was reportedly like 26 or 27. But Marty Scurll is part of Villain Enterprises, and Brody King is also part of Villain Enterprises. And apparently they put out a video of him saying that he's going to be on his own now. So is that a sign that that group's going to be disbanded due to all those, well, basically it's not allegations. He's admitted it. It's just a matter of, we know it's legal in the UK, I guess, to have sex with a 16-year-old, but does Ring of Honor approve of their booker thinking that that's all right? I guess we're going to see. Barra7331 tipped me $5 and says, what I think of bare knuckle fighting. There's been a lot of issues with bare knuckle fighting promotions not paying their fighters. So I'm not a supporter of it for that reason, because there doesn't really seem to be legit promotions, and you really fuck up your knuckles and your brain doing that. So to do that and then have the promoters screw you sucks. Barlight Broker tipped me $2 and says, don't ever interview Cedric the Entertainer. I do not know who that is. No idea who that is. I do know Cedric Rougeau, who we were talking about earlier, and I have interviewed him. I don't know if that's a joke about him or if there's another wrestler named that. You can respond and tell me. In Impact News, Dave Meltzer brings up that they have not released their pay-per-view numbers for Slammiversary. They were talking about Slammiversary being talked about more than their previous pay-per-view that they had, Hard to Kill. That I think the female was still the Impact champion at that point. I think she's the undefeated Impact champion, Tessa Blanchard, but they haven't released any numbers. So put out your numbers, Impact. Tell us how many people bought your pay-per-view if you want us to be impressed. Did over 1,000 people buy your pay-per-view? Did over 500 people buy your pay-per-view? Did over 200 people buy your pay-per-view? Release your numbers and let us know. And while you're at it, let us know how many people watch your TV show. Pro Wrestling Noah are returning to Karuken Hall in Japan July 18th. Or they did return, and they had 494 fans in attendance, which is the allowed capacity during this coronavirus time. New Japan News, Tom Lawler debuted on July 17th. I do hold the victory over Tom Lawler. That match is posted here on the Hannibal TV. When he choked me in that match, my throat was feeling it for a couple days after, but I pulled off the victory. I do respect him, and I'm happy if he signs with New Japan. I mean, he is under MLW contract, but we've seen that MLW allows their wrestlers to work for other companies, which is one of the reasons I like MLW. They allow their wrestlers to have a lot of freedom. And Dave Meltzer reporting this again. Will Ospreay, who's been involved in the speaking out allegations, he's been continuing to battle depression. I know so many people that are depressed in this lockdown situation. I mean, everyone's depressed. And one thing that I can't stand, you guys, some of you are going to hate on me for this, of people continuously whining about how depressed they are. Poor me, feel sorry for me, blah, 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 blah. Get help. Get help. But give me a break. I don't care. I don't understand how that's news. Just because there's a million people depressed right now. A lot of people committed suicide during this lockdown situation, all the depression it's caused. And I know so many wrestlers that are on mental health medications, but only a small percentage of them will actually come out and constantly whine about it. CMLL has asked for permission in Mexico to once again begin running empty arena events, but that's going to be up to the government to decide. AAA has said that their Triple Mania is likely not going to happen this year, but it all depends on the Mexican government. In MMA and boxing news, Mike Tyson, who's 54, I already reported on this, but I'll briefly touch on it. He's going to be doing an 8-round exhibition match against Roy Jones Jr., who's 51, on September 12th. And as I previously brought up, I literally almost fought Roy Jones Jr. about 3 years ago. I came very, very close to fighting him on a pay-per-view where he was going to fight a fan. And it's really unfortunate because I was actually talking to the promoters, and my video promoting it had over 60,000 hits, whereas the guy who ultimately fought him and got knocked out in the second round only had about like 8,000 hits on his video. They wanted me to have the Roy Jones Jr. fight, but the Arizona Athletic Commission would not sanction it because of the weight difference. Unfortunately, even though I literally got a private boxing trainer to start learning how to box, thinking I might get that fight. I've been improving it since then, but I would have been at the disadvantage, but I still would have liked to have fight Roy Jones Jr. You can't lose going into a fight against Roy Jones Jr. unless he kills you, like literally kills you. To be in a ring with someone like that, I would have enjoyed. But anyways, apparently Mike Tyson is going to be the underdog in this fight. I think they're using 12-ounce gloves, no headgear, 8 rounds. Jake Paul, who's a huge star on YouTube, is going to be taking on NBA guard Nate Robinson, also on the show. Now, prior to the McGregor versus Donald Cerrone fight, which, by the way, many believe people was a work. Many people believe they worked that. That had the pay-per-view streaming record, but prior to that, Jake Paul held the pay-per-view record for his fight versus KSI that did 800,000 pay-per-view buys. So for streaming pay-per-view, 780,000 buys. So I love the people that make fun of YouTubers and say, oh, you're a YouTube star. You're nothing but a YouTube star. Some dickhead thought he was cool that wanted to insult me and did a picture of me with a YouTube wrestling title on recently. It's like YouTube is the future, and people make a lot of money in YouTube, and YouTube is only going to get more and more popular. So, as I said, Jake Paul held the record, a YouTuber. I think it was only his second fight, 780,000 buys. That's pretty damn impressive. I don't think who knows if WWE's come close to ever touching that. I seem to recall the Extreme Rules pay-per-view. Don't quote me on this, but I think I recall reading it got about 50,000 buys. The biggest crowd in combat sports in the U.S. in a long time happened July 18th, where 52-year-old Pat Milicic, who I've interviewed on this channel, I highly suggest people look that up. He even talks about this fight on my channel, UFC Hall of Famer Pat Milicic, interview with Hannibal. He had a kickboxing fight against Michael Nunn, who is a 57-year-old former 2-time middleweight division boxing champion who just got out of prison. He had a fight against Milicic in front of 3,500 fans in Davenport, Iowa, the Clash of the Legends, and Nunn won by decision. In UFC news, the state of Nevada, as we're talking about fighters' pay, the state of Nevada has enacted legislation that has been passed that makes fight purses for MMA fighters confidential now, because they don't want us knowing that these guys are getting their brains beat out for pennies. This leaves only California, Arizona, and Florida as the states where purses can be made public. Except for in boxing, the purses will still be made public due to something called the Muhammad Ali Act, which requires the numbers to be submitted to the commission and the public, where MMA doesn't fall under that act. So it's a big win for the UFC, as Meltzer says here, who they don't want the fighters or fans knowing what the other fighters are making. Apparently, UFC and the Palms, which are owned by the Fertitta brothers, are working on a deal where a floor of the Palms, which I've been to many times, it's right in front of the Cauliflower Alley Club Gold Coast Hotel where they hold the Cauliflower Alley reunion for wrestling. And I've crossed. Here's a secret. The famous wrestlers, like when Shawn Michaels appeared and Kevin Nash and all those guys at the Cauliflower Alley Club, they actually stay at the Palms and just cross over for the Cauliflower Alley Club for whatever reason. Maybe they don't want to be around the fans or whatever. But yeah, the Palms is going to do a UFC themed floor with a physical Hall of Fame. So UFC might have a physical Hall of Fame before WWE. Dana White says he's not going to rush Khabib to come back after his father's passing. And Fight Pass has expanded into Japan. I'll go through some of your questions, but I have an appointment at 11, so I'm not going to go on too long. Thanks again for the tips. Barlight Broker says WWE will sink without Lance Storm. I'll be honest, I don't know if Lance Storm will make really any of a difference, whether he's working for them or not. I just find it funny that as a technician, he's much more qualified to be an agent than a Sylvain Grenier, who was out of the business before Pat Patterson probably got him hired back in WWE. Because what I don't understand is, out of everyone involved in the concussions lawsuit, why does Sylvain Grenier get hired back first? What makes him so special? It's not like he was burning it up on the indie scene. He had a company for a couple of years that went out of business. Everyone likes to make fun of Great North Wrestling, but we've been around 13 years. We can't run right now due to lockdown regulations, but I've been around a long time for people. Yes, we've had shows in front. Our biggest show is in front of 4,000. Our lowest show, at some points I was going to 4 different provinces, and I wasn't able to do all the advanced publicity myself, and some shows didn't make money. But I'm still going. And right now, the Hannibal TV and my company is prospering, and we'll be back. Smoking weed with a small town says he smoked weed with the Godfather on Instagram Live. Godfather smoked weed and took a shot of Jack before his shoot interview with me, which you can look up on here. Everyone was wondering why he was looking so happy. There's your answer. Alain Mallet says, bring back the real Quebecers, Jacques, PCO, and Cedric. Yes. At one point, Jacques actually pitched to them to have me and Cedric with Jacques managing, which would have been great because, anyways, the way WWE controls everything and how the company is sinking right now, let them do whatever they're going to do. But I just find it funny. Jacques should be in the Hall of Fame. And not only is he not in the Hall of Fame, but they're making fun of him on TV. Brett Hamiel says, let me cry on Twitter. Maybe I'll get $1 million contract from WWE like that Drake Maverick did, and we haven't really heard from him since they brought him back, really. I don't know what it is. It's like a disadvantage to be like a big guy in wrestling now. The little guys, like the Drake Mavericks of the world, and the fat guys, like the Keith Lees of the world and the Kevin Owens, they get contracts. Big Brother Thunder, why hasn't WWE signed Nick Aldis? I'm sure they actually would sign him. But he's under contract to Billy Corgan. But NWA hasn't run since January 25th, and there's been rumors that they might never run again. They could have him defend the title in other companies, but that title is just a joke. And Nick Aldis didn't really boost NWA. Their YouTube channel has abysmal viewers. Colonel Quayle says payouts are admissions of guilt. Barlight Broker's happy to hear about the bad Raw ratings. Robert Scott, would I ever join AEW? I would be absolutely miserable there. And I wouldn't get along with the executives. So I don't see that ever happening. They're more interested in hiring their friends anyways. But even if you look at my personality and how I like to present wrestling and the type of wrestling I like to watch. And I mean, I saw an interview recently with Orange Cassidy where he said one of the reasons he was hired was because the Young Bucks, who are executives with AEW, liked how his gimmick was a slap in the face to traditional professional wrestling. And I'm more of a traditional professional wrestling guy, so I would be absolutely miserable. Polar Bear, who's telling me about the Adam Cole angle, it was just an angle. All it was an angle. That was not real. I didn't even want to bring it up, but it's in the Observer this week that was an angle. And yes, he is small. I agree. He looks like a 7th grader. But yeah, it was an angle. I can confirm that for you. Solar says eating weed is by far healthier. And it also lasts longer. Polar Bear says Russo smokes the devil's lettuce. Ha ha ha. There's a couple more. There's a ton of questions actually, but I'm running out of time. Would I interview Megan, the male horse stallion? I don't know who that is. Someone is always obsessed with a do-rag. I actually wore a do-rag in one video, and it was just kind of a tribute to the Macho Man. It was a Macho Man do-rag that I bought in the 80s. They used to sell them at WWE events. Andrew Machado says UFC makes all the money. Fighters get paid peanuts. Richard Min says if the fight goes over 2 rounds, Roy Jones Jr. wins. I think that type, I'm interested in it. I'm seeing now that my connection is unstable, so I'm going to call it a night. William Hamby, do I like Lex Luger? Yes. I have an interview with him on here. Jefferson E. White, buddy of mine, says Adam Cole is not big enough to be a horse jockey. Canada Low says Megan the Stallion is a rapper. I'm open to interviewing anybody. Hook me up, especially if it's a cute girl. Speaking of that, I'm interviewing Taylor Hendricks next week. Actually, I think she might still be with Ring of Honor, but former Impact Wrestling gut check winner, and she's gorgeous. And I'm impressed with her wrestling as well. So thanks for all the views. I'll probably Sunday night do a Q&A on here. So I'll keep you posted on that. Have a great weekend. I'm going to